Hey guys, it's Dylan with Oscillator. Today I'm going to show you how to build a drum fill from scratch. It's going to sound like this. So right now I'm working on this remix and I made this little drum fill that leads into the drop, and I tried some stuff out and it ended up sounding pretty cool. So I thought I might as well share it with you guys. But before we jump into the session, head down to the description below and you can download the final drum fill sample that we made in this video and you can use it in your own song. And if you accidentally hit the subscribe button while you're there, I won't mind. So the first thing that I did when building this drum fill is I programmed in a fill using MIDI notes on a simpler instrument with a single snare inside that simpler instrument. I added a kick as a second layer to this chain, which I'll talk about in a second, but for now we'll stick with just the one snare. Okay, so let's go inside our MIDI region now and you can see the drum fill that I programmed in. So it's a really simple 4 and drum fill with a triplet leading up into the 4. So with a click on, it will sound like this. If you take a closer look though, I did a few things that make this feel a little bit more natural. So with the triplet, I have a rise on the pitch, and that helps simulate the feeling of increase in velocity, because when you hit a snare harder, it will have a little bit of a higher pitch. That bird out of here. Okay, so a rise in pitch simulates a rise in velocity. Not extreme, but just a small amount, or one semitone for each of these triplet hits. But then I also used the velocity lane to create that velocity rise. As you can see, the first hit is much quieter, second one is a little bit louder, and the third one a little bit louder. And then when we hit the flammed hit on beat 4, we've got maximum velocity with a slight variation between the flams. Again here, the second flam hit, slightly lower velocity, and then a variation between the velocities in the flam as well. And that helps with the phase issues. If your flam is too close together, it can sort of sound weird, but if you play with the velocity, it can help out. Okay, so once again, these together sound like this. Really nice, simple electro fill. Now what I wanted to do though is beef it up a little bit. So I added a kick as a second sample inside this chain, and the kick sounds like this. Really organic, roomy sort of kick sound. Now, using extra sample layers inside an instrument rack like this is a really powerful technique. If you guys want to know a little bit more about instrument racks, let me know in the comments and I'll make a video about that. Or if we are further in the future and I already have made a video about that, then you can check that out in the cards here. But for right now, all you need to know is that when you add a second layer to the chain list, the MIDI notes are triggering that layer as well. So it just plays it exactly as it did the snare. So together, the kick and the snare sound like this. Very subtle, but it gives it a little bit more low end and a little bit more of a roomy sound. So that sounded pretty cool just like that, but I wanted to try out some other things. The next thing I did is I brought in a drum fill sample and I matched it up to my drum fill. So this is a lot of fun. Originally, this drum fill sample sounded like this. Really cool, really organic, a little bit lazy, a little bit out of time. But I brought it in and I put it right below my drum fill. Then what I had to do was enable warping, and I put it on the beats warp mode, and I changed the transient loop mode to just forward because I didn't want the in-between artifacts. Then I also reduced the envelope a little bit and left it at 84. So that means now I need to match up this sample to my own drum fill. So all I did is I created warp markers for these major hits and I moved them around manually to make sure that it lined up with my drum fill. So these together now sound like this. You can hear it's got a little bit more of that rim-shotty sound with that extra sample. It already had sort of 2 triplets in the beginning and then 2 hits. So I sort of just moved things around and made it fit. One thing to note, make sure you're relying on your ears rather than your eyes when you're doing warping like this, because sometimes what looks right visually isn't what feels right or what sounds right. So just make sure that you're using your ears more than your eyes when you're doing this kind of thing. Now we've got our snare, we've got an extra rim-shotty drum fill layered on top of it, but we're not done yet. The next thing I did is I added this white noise riser, which sounds like this. Just a little whoosh, and that sweeps in during those triplets. So it just gives it a little bit more of an excitement into the hit. Those 3 together sound like this. And then the last thing I did was I added this clap snare reverb layer, which sounds like this. And I have it on the second flammed hit. So we have this white noise riser that sweeps into the first hit, and then on the second hit, we've got the release. So it's like sweep up, first hit, second hit, clap with reverb, and that just sort of like explodes into the drop. Finally, I grouped all of these together. So I just selected those 4 tracks, and I hit Command G, which creates a group. It's like a mini submix. If you guys want to know a little bit more about the difference between submixes, grouping, and buses, let me know that in the comments as well, and I'll make a video about that. So then once I grouped them together, I just put a glue compressor on that group so that it will glue them together. So all together, this drum fill sounds like this. It's very subtle, but all of these little layers give it a little bit more character, which you can compare to if I play just the snare. So that was the original snare fill that I programmed, and then everything together. A little bit more full, natural sounding, and just kind of cooler. So to recap, first we programmed in a snare fill using MIDI. Next, we added a kick to the instrument chain to fill out the sound of that snare fill. Third, we brought in a drum fill sample and we matched it up using the warp function in Ableton and lined it up to our original fill. Then we brought in a white noise riser to sweep up. And then we put a snare clap with some reverb on it on that second hit. And then finally, we grouped everything together and put a glue compressor on the group.
Am I still streaming?
All right, let's wrap this up. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial about building a drum fill from scratch. I hope it inspired you to try out some of these techniques when you're building your own drum fills. Don't forget to go down to the description below, download this drum fill. Please subscribe to this channel for more tutorials. And if you want to know a little bit more about my production process, you can watch this video in which I give a full walkthrough of my song Undefined. It's a lot of fun. Check it out. All right, thanks so much, guys. See ya.